Whatever your resolutions are for the coming year, persistence with consistence are two keys that will repay you many times over. All the very best for 2020 and beyond. By now, most of us have officially waved goodbye to 2019 and welcomed 2020 with open arms. Now more than ever would be an important moment to reflect on what's happened in your life over the last decade and to look forward to a brand new decade with a determined outlook that will ultimately lead to a happy and fulfilling life. A life where we learn from the past mistakes while celebrating our successes. And people often make the mistake of not having a plan on how they develop their New Year's resolutions. Not seeking help and guidance could make all the difference between success and failure. In many ways, this guidance came unexpectedly to Stuart, a 75-year-old who quit smoking cigarettes after, wait for it, 60 years. Listen to the following phone interview with Stuart from my apartment in New York to his home in Melbourne, Australia. Enjoy. All right, so officially begin. So Stuart, welcome to the call. And to anyone that's listening, my name is Marco. I'm the, I guess you can say, hypnotist and coach from MCH, that's Melbourne Cognitive Hypnotherapy, as well as Hypnotist NYC, which is obviously located in New York. So I run both businesses. And I'm currently speaking to a gentleman, by the name of Stuart. He's currently a non-smoker, but he was a smoker for many, many years. And there was a few revelations that came out, a few instances where he questioned the habit of smoking and whether or not he wanted to keep walking on this path. And he decided to make some changes. So without further ado, I'll introduce Stuart, and then we'll sort of go from there.
Good morning, Marco. Yes, I'm fine. Thank you very much. I've just been up and had breakfast and generally getting ready for my day.
Fantastic. If you like to, just in your own words, Stuart, just talk about your story and in terms of where you're at and, essentially what sort of journey you've been on in the last 12 months. I think a lot of our listeners will be, happy to hear that.
Sure. For the last 12 months, my health has deteriorated to a certain extent. And about 2 months ago, I had a breathing episode where I actually stopped breathing and was rushed to hospital. And very luckily for myself, the hospital corrected everything that was going on and pulled me out of it. I was smoking at the time and stupidly, I suppose, in one respect, that when I was released from hospital, I didn't stop smoking and never gave any thought to it, really. But 2 months later, I had a doctor's appointment and a health care check. And the nurse that was doing the healthcare check, she was relatively angry with me because I was still smoking. And I said, well, I'm surprised in a way myself. And she said, you've got to stop. And I saw tears in her eyes, and I thought, my God, I know this nurse very well, so, but it surprised me that someone that, is not a relative or is only on a professional basis with me would care that much that would start, to cry. I went away from that, and it hit me, and I have not smoked again since. Now, this is, I suppose, 2 weeks now that I'm free of cigarettes, and I have no intention whatsoever of going back to them. It really hit home that I'd been selfish for, probably 60 years of my living, and I really, took stock of what was going on and realised that it's not just for myself, but it's for everybody around me that's really cared for me and or really does care for me. So it's been a journey of self-indulgence, I suppose, for most of my life, and now I've reached 75 years old, and I'm determined that I shall stay on this path and not take up cigarettes anymore.
First of all, congratulations. It's been 2 weeks, and you've taken that step to becoming smoke-free. And just anyone that's listening, Stuart is not a client of mine. What happened was he actually was booked in for a consultation to speak with me, and the person who had booked him in was his GP, his doctor, his physician, I believe. Was that right,
Yes,
Stuart?
that's correct.
Okay. So he was booked in to speak with me, and that's why when I called to have my consultation with Stuart, he was unaware that I had a website, and he knew very little about me. And the reason why he was essentially booked in, I guess his doctor or his nurse had some concerns and looked into options such as hypnotherapy to help him quit. So him and I started talking, and when he told me that story, that he had stopped, and I essentially had congratulated him on the spot for quitting smoking because he did it without my assistance. But then when he told me the story, I thought it's quite a beautiful, inspirational, even moving story because, you've been smoking for 60 years. Is that right, Stuart? Okay.
Yep.
So, you had that, you've been smoking for 60 years. Now, I believe you had attempted to quit smoking in the past. I think from memory, you had said you've utilized a form of hypnotherapy, or you went to see somebody
That's
else
correct.
to help you quit? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you made the attempt in the past. And now, out of curiosity, did you actually quit when you saw that hypnotherapist?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
It lasted for 15 years,
Mm.
and it was only. I lived overseas for 12 months, and when I came back, I had a lot of stress involved in my life. I live with my son, and he's a smoker, and I just one day said, give us a cigarette again. It started me back on the track again.
And it looked like there was a perfect storm there because when you had quit, you were a non-smoker and you remained a non-smoker for many years. And it wasn't that, hypnotherapy had worn off all of a sudden, because it doesn't really apply like that. If a person has relapsed, there are a number of self-saboteurs that play a big role in this relapse. And one of them is stress. Stress can be definitely a big saboteur. And also the person may think, well, I'm quite stressed. I'm not sure if this will help me, but let me try it out. It's only going to be one cigarette. They'll smoke their one cigarette and thinking it's only one, no big deal. And that's very possible. But in many cases, it's never just one. And that person will go from one cigarette, and then the next weekend, it might be 2 cigarettes, and then 5, then 10, then 20, and then they're back to where they started with that nurse. Now, when she had, tears in her eyes, and she was angry, she was upset, and, quite emotional and so on, something happened with you, Stuart. In terms of that moment when she felt that, you kind of went inside yourself and started asking questions. Would you mind sharing a bit more about, in that moment, what happened with you?
Well, I think I realised at that point in time how selfish I had been because I hadn't given thought to anybody else around me or why I was doing it in the first place. And because she was so emotional about it and touched me, I only know her from a professional point of view and didn't expect that to happen. And consequently I went away from that appointment and did a lot of self-analysing, I suppose, that it's not just me that it affects, it's so many others, especially if I happen to pass because of it. I've got two loving sons, and I decided that it's unfair for me to do something like that to them. So, yeah.
When she had expressed emotions, and they were quite spontaneous, and that took you by surprise, and I guess in that moment it was quite heartfelt, you had internalized your focus and, as you described it, self-analyzing, and gone on a bit of a search and thought to yourself, well, if I'm having this effect on this woman, this nurse who has been caring for me, and she had said that, oh, well, you're part of our family and so on, and you can see where you go on this path, and she's having this response, then what kind of effect am I having on my own two sons?
Absolutely.
And then when you asked yourself that question, then what happened? Did you sort of, did you hit a switch?
No, I went away after the appointment, of course, thinking about the health assessment that had been done and where I was at health-wise and so forth, and then started to think about how this nurse had shown her emotions when she didn't need to, in one respect, I think. She was there the day that I collapsed in the clinic, and they had to rush me straight to hospital from there. So, she's followed my life for, probably 12 months or more, and realises that, and as she said, she's part of the family there, and it's quite emotional, and I realised then that it's not just myself. I've got to start thinking of others.
So Stuart, here we are. You and I are talking on opposite sides of the globe. You're a man. I think you're 75 from memory.
Yes.
You had been smoking for 60 years. You had tried, many times and different attempts, and with hypnotherapy in the past, you had succeeded for 15 years. Obviously, you had relapsed, but for a good chunk of that time, you had stopped. And then it took a nurse with an emotional response to get you analysing your life and how you're affecting to other people. Did you think it would have been that easy? Looking back now, do you think it would have been that easy for you to do it on your own? Do you think you needed to have that response from someone, or do you think you could have done it on your own?
No, I certainly think that response was the catalyst or the trigger to my expanding my thoughts and not being so self-centered, and I suppose, and thinking, well, it's my life. I can do with it what I want. And I realised that that's not really the case.
Gotcha. If you were to give advice to anybody else out there, we have young people who are taking up smoking every single day. We have other people maybe in their 20s who partying, having a good time, and they're smoking and thinking, I'll deal with it in my 30s. And then, of course, they look into doing something about it in their 30s, but they find it maybe difficult to quit. They think, oh, they can't do it, and they think they have to give something up and they're not ready for it. And then, of course, they get older. So for someone who had been smoking for all those years and now you're 75 years old, what advice can you give to other people out there, either young, middle-aged, or even elderly?
I think like me, who I now see that I was so self-centered and didn't look at the wider picture, as I say, of consequences of hurting other people. And I think that's what people have to do, apart from having, say, the willpower to give up smoking. I think they've got to think of the consequences of the broader picture and the people that they're going to hurt because of it.
Mm.
It's not an easy road, I think, unless your mindset is changed where you can really say, I don't need that.
Mm.
And that's where it comes to at the end of the day, I think.
Right.
My point of view, anyway.
Because when you go beyond yourself and start looking at, as you say, the bigger picture and how it's affecting others, then it doesn't really become, about willpower anymore. It becomes about like self-power, and you're tapping into these resources where you know that ultimately it's going to benefit everyone around you, not just yourself, but people who are close to you, and those people who are close to others and their children and so forth. Once again, thank you so much for allowing me to have this conversation with you, because when I heard your story, I really had to sit down with you and ask you a few questions about your journey, where you're at. And again, just so everyone knows, this is completely unscripted. It was an impromptu conversation that we have. Stuart is not a client of mine. He is someone who was referred on to me by his local doctor. However, the conversation we had initially was so awe-inspiring that I really had to meet up with him again and call him from my New York apartment to his house in Melbourne, Australia. And yeah, again, it's such an inspirational journey, and it just shows that when it comes to cigarette smoking or other forms of addictions, that a person who is looking for a way out, they're looking for an external way, they're looking for some sort of a pill or a drug or a method to help them, release themselves from the smoking habits. And in many ways, when I say release, I do talk as if it's a prison, and the people feel like they're in that prison and they can't escape from it. And all prisons have locks, and essentially we're looking for that key to put in that lock, and we think, oh, that guard over there has that key. But it's the few prisons where the person who has the key is a person who's already in the prison, and they just have to recognize that they've got that key, and it took a nurse to help them find that key, to reach in and get that key and then put into the lock and then turn that key, hear that click, and then that sort of big door opens wide open and you're able to walk through it. And that's what you did, Stuart. And again, that's such an inspirational story, and I'm so happy for you and happy for your sons and other people around you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess that concludes our interview. Again, thank you so much for partaking in this interview. It really means a lot to me. I do wish you the very best. And a chapter has been, basically one big chapter of your life is complete, and now the next chapter is unwritten, because now you're going to write in that chapter. You're going to live your life on your terms, and enjoy the rest of your day. Smoke-free days ahead of you. And thank you once again, Stuart. It really means a lot to me.
Yeah. You're more than welcome, Mark. It was inspiration talking to you. So, yeah.
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you very much. I wasn't expecting that.
Well,
No problem.
it's true. Okay. Thank you very much.
Take care. Thank you. As you have heard, after 60 years of smoking, Stuart has stopped the behavior after an emotional response from a nurse, one that potentially helped shift his thinking in ways he didn't expect. If this story moved you in any way, consider subscribing, as I have more exciting content coming your way over the next few months. And if you know any smokers, feel free to share this video with them. As always, thanks for watching.